I was muted. So if you're joining us for the town hall, SFParents town hall on more funding for SFUSD, you're in the right place. We'll get started in just a moment as more folks come in from the waiting room.
Buenas noches, bienvenidos a todas y a todos. Estamos nada más esperando unos cuantos minutos para que las demás personas puedan enlazarse. Muchas gracias.
歡迎大家參與，請等待一陣，我哋等全部人一齊，咁我哋就可以開始。多謝。
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Madi Rahimi. I am an SFUSD public school dad. I am a volunteer and a member of SF Parents Leadership Council. My son is at SFUSD Dolores Huerta Elementary School. And we are here for the Let's Shake the Trees webinar to learn more about how to actually fund public education in San Francisco. So let's go a little bit over some housekeeping items and translation details. You can submit your questions at any time in the chat. We have a Spanish and Cantonese interpretation available. Once we go over this slide, there will be a globe icon available. You can click on it and click label interpretation at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select your language. And if you don't see the globe icon, just type in interpretation help in the chat and someone should be able to help you with that. So if you wanna, Gabriel, you wanna talk about this?
Bienvenidos a todas y a todos. Estamos aquí para un webinar o un seminario web en cuanto a cómo podemos recaudar fondos para las escuelas públicas de San Francisco. En un momento vamos a abrir los canales de interpretación. Para la parte de interpretación necesitamos que usted haga clic en un globo terráqueo, que en un momentito vamos a dar las instrucciones para que ustedes se puedan enlazar. Gracias. Cantonese.
晚安各位，咁我係廣東話傳譯員，咁我係而家幫你傳譯。咁我係叫 Mardy 啦，我係三藩市公立學校一位爸爸，我個仔女喺 Dolores 嘅小學就讀嘅。咁我而家想講咧，我哋今晚嘅流程，如果隨時咧，你可以喺留言區咧提問嘅。而家咧係想講點樣係接駁廣東話嘅翻譯，咁你可以喺下邊咧嗰一個選項入邊咧撳落嗰個圓形一個地球，咁然之後咧就揀 Chinese 中文，咁你就可以直接聽廣東話嘅口譯噶啦。多謝。
So a quick overview of the agenda for tonight. We will be hearing from the mayor's office, and then we will have a brief budget overview by one of the staff at SF Parents, and then we will go to our panel and our Q&A sections after that. So who we are at SF Parents. We are a strong community of San Francisco families. SF Parents is a nonprofit that started in 2020 and has been advocating for excellence and equity through the parent power at SFUSD. And we've been achieving multiple wins for our kids through the advocacy of this organization. There's the mission and vision statement for the organization. I like the vision. We envision a future where San Francisco is one of the best places in the country for children and youth of all races, socioeconomic backgrounds, and abilities to grow up and get an excellent public education. So why are we here tonight? SF Parents has been advocating for funding and a stable, responsibly managed budget that prioritizes the students for years right now. It's been since 2021. We've been advocating for that in this organization, and with continued rise of expenses and a structural deficit that the district has, we've heard from families, teachers, and community members that you're eager to work collaboratively together to try to unlock more funding for SFUSD. By the end of the evening, we hope to have identified together real strategies that we can get behind together this year and in the near future. And it will take all of us to make this happen. So we are going to hear from our panel on how we can work together and come together as a city and as a parents community to make this possible. But first, let's go to the introduction from the mayor's office. I would love to welcome and introduce Chief Kunal Modi, who is the policy chief for the mayor, and he's addressing all of us tonight on behalf of the mayor. We're grateful that they're joining us today to talk about how mayor's office is thinking about our public education and ways that it is planning to invest in SFUSD.
Terrific. Well, Madhi, first of all, thank you so much to you and to the entire SF Parents community for hosting this evening's town hall. Thank you for inviting us from the mayor's office to be a part of it, and I look forward to learning from the panelists later this afternoon. So my name's Kunal Modi. I'm the mayor's chief of health and human services, and on behalf of the mayor, help liaise and coordinate and partner with SFUSD. And I just want to start by saying, we deeply value the role that not only public education, but SFUSD families play in our community. Even though the mayor doesn't have direct control or formal partnership with the school district, we really come from the mindset that SFUSD families are our city's families. And we're working very closely with the district, with the school board, with parent communities like through SF Parents to make sure that we're trying to align our strategies, be purposeful with the city's investments so we can drive towards the same goals that the district is advancing around student outcomes, around fiscal stewardship, around smoother operations for the district. So, every day, one of the things that Mayor has talked about is how do we make San Francisco a place that's more affordable and livable for our families. He introduced a family opportunity agenda earlier this year, and how the city partners with and wraps around SFUSD is a core part of that. In fact, every 3 weeks, I and the mayor, we convene our Department of Public Health, our Department of Early Childhood, the superintendent and her team from the district, City College, libraries, Rec and Park, in one meeting where we talk about how are the ways that the city can support the district and our families. We think about everything from very upstream maternal infant health outcomes through ensuring through our free childcare program that students arrive at the district kindergarten ready. We want to think about all the ways our city departments can contribute to advancing goals around third grade literacy, eighth grade math, college and career readiness, so that our students have the benefit of taking advantage of all the resources in our community. And we think about how organizations like Rec and Park in the library can help advance those goals and create the kind of livability that makes San Francisco a great place to send your kids to public schools. We're proud that the city actually already invests pretty heavily in kids, both through our programming and our direct financial support of the district. We're actually the only city in California that contributes local general fund dollars to its school district. That translates to about $3,000 per student in the district today that comes from the city general fund apart from its independent funding sources. We've also tried to really double down over the past year in programs that we know work to advance some of the goals that the district's advancing, like high impact tutoring to support the district's third grade literacy goals, where we find tutors to come to SFUSD schools to provide targeted coaching to students that need. And we're looking forward to supporting the rollout of the new math curriculum as well in the future. We also invest heavily in after-school programming through our Department of Children, Youth, and Families, which invests about $100 million, many of which support students in the district through programs like the Boys and Girls Club and other great programs that your families are likely familiar with. We know the school day doesn't cover the entire workday, and so we're trying to figure out ways that the city can be a partner to help stand up the high quality programming that can allow parents to thrive as well as our students. So there's going to be a really good conversation this evening about funding. We're definitely very engaged in that conversation. We look forward to learning about it. I know there's going to be all sorts of acronyms that come up from ERAF to PEEF to Student Success Fund. We should also talk about collectively what we can do as a community to advocate in Sacramento for funding formulas that more fairly support districts like SFUSD. But we hope this is the start of a conversation. The mayor is really excited to learn from it, and we're here to support the district and the families that are part of it in whatever ways make sense for our community. We want San Francisco to be a place where families feel like they can stay, where they can thrive, and where they have confidence that their kids can also do the same. So that's our goal, and we look forward to the conversation tonight. So thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you. I don't know if my video. Thank you so much. Meredith, can you turn my video on too? All right, great. So thank you so much, Kunal. Really appreciate having you here. And with that, I would like to introduce Debbie Liu, who is an education policy analyst for SF Parents, and will give us a brief overview of the budget to get everyone on the same page before we start the panel. Debbie.
Thank you. Thanks, Marty. Yes, hi, my name is Debbie. I'm a SFUSD parent of an alum now in college and a high school junior. And we're going to spend a few minutes going very quickly at a very high level so that we parents can have a shared understanding of what we mean when we talk about the SFUSD budget. Okay, next slide. So we are going to be talking about revenues and expenses. And so when we think about SFUSD's budget, which for this school year is $1.3 billion, we're talking about three major buckets. The first and most important and largest bucket of money coming in is state money. The biggest portion of that bucket is something called local control funding formula money. We'll get into that. So the second budget that we just heard from the mayor's office, from Kunal, local money. As he said, SFUSD gets a large portion of its budget revenues from the city and county. And finally, the smallest bucket of money is from the United States Department of Education. It's small, but it's also very important. So we'll talk about all three of these funds. Next slide. So like I said, the biggest component of state funding for SFUSD is something called local control funding formula. For folks who haven't been in the district for very long, I remember back in 2013 when LCFF came into reality and it significantly increased the amount of state funding for SFUSD. So it was a big win for the district. So what LCFF does is it gives a flat amount for every school district for a per pupil allocation called base grants. It also has supplemental grants and concentration grants for three specific student groups: low-income students, English learner students, and foster youth students. So because of SFUSD's student population, we get a significant amount of LCFF supplemental grant and concentration grant money from the state. Okay, next slide. And local revenues are also really important. It comes from property taxes. You'll like Kunal had mentioned, we have a lot of acronyms here. You'll hear about QT, FWEA. These are property taxes that gets allocated to SFUSD. The city and county also has funds for PEEF, PEEF, and the Student Success Fund. These are voter-approved measures that allocate money through the city and county to the district. We also get private donations and grant money. Next slide. So our federal government also provides special education funding through IDEA, and many of us parents may have heard of Title I funding, which is allocated specifically for schools with a high percentage of socioeconomically disadvantaged students. And then there are also other categorical restricted funds from the federal government. Okay, next slide. So we were talking about money coming in. We're going to talk quickly about money going out. So we have in our current year budget projected spending of about $1.4 billion. The vast majority, 78%, is for employee compensation. The next biggest bucket of spending is for contracts. So the biggest bucket is for our employees. Our second biggest is for people who aren't our employees, but also provide services to our students. Much of that goes to special education provider contracts, but we're also talking about other education consultants and technology and things like that. So a small percent for books and supplies. All right, next slide. So I don't know if you remember, but we talked about revenues and expenses. Our revenues are 1.3 billion and our budgeted expenses are 1.4 billion. So this year, like many years here in SFUSD, we have a misalignment between our revenues and expenses, and we're going to spend more. So we want to figure out why. And there are some major structural issues that explain why we spend more than we receive in revenues. We're going to talk about declining enrollment, absenteeism, the special education program, the misalignment between one-time funding and ongoing expenses, and the fact that these structural misalignments cannot be met through use of reserves and fund balance. So we'll go to the next slide really quickly. So enrollment is just, how many kids do we have signed up to attend our schools? Before COVID, we were at about 52,000 kids here in SFUSD, and in a couple years, we're projected to be at about 47,266 students. Next slide. So enrollment does not actually determine how much we get from the state for LCFF funding. So that's based on something called average daily attendance, which means that having kids show up every day to our schools and our classrooms is super important, but SFUSD has higher than average statewide chronic absenteeism. So down in the corner, you'll see that for SFUSD, the California School Dashboard shows us in the red when it comes to kids who are considered chronically absent. That means they miss 10 or more days of school. So this is something that we need to address because it directly affects how much we get from state funding. Next slide. Special education is also something we wanted to highlight. So we need to provide a high quality education for all of our students, and increasingly it is expensive to provide a quality education to students with special needs. The costs are increasing. It's increasingly complicated to provide educational supports to a lot of our kids post-pandemic. So 10 years ago, we had a situation where the state provided about 2/3 of special education funding. That has now dropped to about 1/3. And the federal government's contribution to SPED funding has dropped from about 25% to 10%. And that difference has been met up with our local funds. So money from our general fund, unrestricted money, is going into special education. Next slide. And just one other thing that is really something to remember, we, like a lot of school districts, have a tendency to use one-time money to fund positions, employees, staff, social workers, counselors, to help our kids after COVID, it was a big need, but what we're experiencing is that these one-time funds, especially federal and state emergency dollars, they're going away, and we do not have identified replacement ongoing money to pay for these people and these programs. So that is a very quick whirlwind overview of revenues, expenses, and sort of the structural budget deficit. Back to you, Madi.
Thank you so much, Debbie. This was really informative. So with that, I think we are ready for our panel. So I would love to introduce our Executive Director of SF Parents, Meredith Dodson, who will be introducing the panelists and moderating the conversation. So Meredith, please.
Thank you so much, Maddie. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Meredith Dodson, a public school mom, one of the co-founders and current executive director of SF Parents Coalition. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for this conversation. I'm excited to kick off the panel, who I'll introduce in a moment. I think President Mandelman is still on his way, but we'll introduce him anyway, and the rest of you can join. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe he's there. But before I welcome them to the stage, I would just like to share that tonight's panel, we all are, sort of on the same page now in terms of the budget. Thank you so much, Debbie, for that overview. And Debbie she's amazing and so knowledgeable about the budget and could give that presentation a 2-hour version of that. And so when I told her, can you do it in 7 or 8 minutes? I'm sure she was stressed, but she did. She managed to get a 2-hour presentation much shorter. So thank you, Debbie. And I hope that helps us all start this panel conversation from the same baseline understanding of the budget. So we are going to have our panel focused on how we make the pie bigger. And Madi shared a little bit about how our past advocacy has really focused just on fixing the budget, avoiding state takeover, and getting our fiscal house in order. But we've been seeing that thanks to Dr. Sue's leadership and the current school board's leadership, especially over the last year or so, our budget has been moving from negative qualification with the state to qualified, and hopefully by June, maybe positive. We'll hear more from the superintendent about where it's at. But we know that we also need to make the pie bigger. And so tonight is about shifting this focus from just fix the budget to how do we get more money to our schools. And it's really something that we've been hearing from a lot of you, our parent community, especially this school year, especially with the strike. We have just a lot of energy around how do we get more money? Where is it? And wherever it is, let's work together and get it for our schools and for our kids, because our kids, our teachers, our schools deserve it. So with that, I would like to introduce and welcome to the stage, so you can turn on your cameras. We have Superintendent Maria Sue. Let me stop the share so you can actually see them. Hi, Dr. Sue. Thanks for joining us tonight. Superintendent Sue was formerly head of the San Francisco Department of Children, Youth, and Families. She's had over 25 plus years in children and family services. And I would say probably the primary focus of your tenure with the district so far has been on fiscal stabilization and achieving budget solvency so that we can better tie our resources to student success. We have Phil Halperin here with us. Welcome to the stage, Phil. He's a state and local education finance expert and philanthropist through the Silver Giving Foundation. He has chaired 10 successful ballot campaigns, raising over billion, okay, but who's counting, for San Francisco's public schools and children. So you can understand why we welcomed him to join us tonight. We also would like to welcome to the stage Jill Nelson Golub, partner at BMWL, an expert in both local and state campaigns. She has worked on ballot measure campaigns, including the 2024 facilities bond, which SF Parents supported. And we're so glad to have her here tonight as well. And we have one more panelist, and I'll text him in a moment to make sure he's on his way. Or maybe one of you can when you're not No, I will. Give me a moment. I'll kick off the conversation and then we'll find out what he's caught up in at City Hall. But I'm sure President Mandelman will be joining us momentarily. But this part of the conversation actually is kicking off with Dr. Sue and Phil Halperin first. So, how we want to start, so we'll have a few different panel blocks. We will be talking about the state situation, the local situation, ballot measure opportunities, and then just what can parents do. I mean, the whole thing will be about thinking about what parents, teachers, and the community can do. But we'll end on that note of, all right, where are we solidifying around with these ideas? So we want to start with what's broken on the state revenue side of things, and how does the state funding formula contribute to that, and what are we doing about it? But just a gut check with Dr. Sue. Oh, she's in a moment. Okay. Okay. Just a gut check to start with Dr. Sue. Can you briefly just confirm? We heard from Debbie about the budget, but can you just update us all on the current status? It looks like it's better than it was. It looks like we're moving towards positive. State takeover threat is reduced. But we also know there's more cuts on the horizon. So can you just give us like a brief gut check? Are we in the right understanding here?
Yeah, so good evening, everyone. And thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Muddy and Debbie. That was a fantastic overview of the budget. So thank you so much for that. And yes, I am actually really, really proud and happy to share that we are moving from crisis management of what we experienced last year to now much more stable stability within our finances, which will allow us to really pivot into more strategic thinking and strategic planning. So yes, I am very enthusiastically able to confirm that we are moving in the right direction. At the last second interim budget presentation, we self-certified as moving into qualified, which is a status that means that we have enough resources to pay for our expenses this year and next year. By the time we present in June at the point of budget adoption, we will be technically in positive status, meaning that we have enough funds to pay for current year, next year, and then the following year. And that's significant because just a year and a half ago, we were on the verge. We were in negative status, negative certification status, but we were really on the verge of running out of cash. And as Debbie very well stated, 80% of our budget goes into salaries. So if we run out of cash, we won't be able to pay for our staff. And our monthly salary expenses is $70 million. So it is significant. And I'm so proud of the work that we did last year in partnership with the board under President Phil Kim's leadership. We were able to make some really, really tough decisions and painful cuts and reductions to our budget that is now leading us into a place of stability and pretty soon into positive certification, which means all the sanctions are lifted and we are now able to control and manage our own budget without the additional state oversight.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, that sounds like good news.
Yes, fantastic news.
Great news, great news. I'm going to pass it over to Phil for a moment. So the superintendent and the school board recently sent an advocacy letter to the state requesting a few things, and I can have the superintendent explain them, or you can explain them. But I would love to hear with your state expertise and love to have you share with us what you think about what the San Francisco Unified District through the superintendent and the school board is advocating for at the state level, along with other major urban districts across the state. What's that about? Does it have to do with this broken revenue issue of how the state funds our schools? And do you agree with what they're calling for? Explain it to us.
I'm not, I'm not going to be better than Debbie, but what I will say is California is uniquely bad at funding its schools, and it's just historically, and we'll talk a little bit about Prop 13 a little later, but historically we have underfunded our schools in a post Prop 13 world. We have actually caught up a lot in terms of the overall dollar amount we're giving our schools. There's another, since we're all about acronyms tonight, there's something called Prop 98, which is the predeterminer for how much money goes to our TK through 12 system plus city plus of community colleges, and that's a fixed number of 40%, right? So 40% of the state budget, which is enormous, most folks don't realize that, goes directly to TK through 12 plus community colleges. And it goes to that even despite the declining enrollment that we've had in the state. So we've got from about over 6 million kids to about 5.4 million kids, and we're still getting that 40%. Then there's the rest of the state budget, which is called the general fund budget. And historically, because we passed the local control funding formula, we were able to get extra dollars out of the general fund and put into overall TK through 12 spending. So that has been sort of a good news story for in terms of the state adequately funding the school districts, and that adequacy number gets bandied about quite a bit. And so the real problem lies at this point, not in the amount, but the how we spend our money, right? And so we don't invest our money in all of the right places and spaces, and the allocations are not as effective and efficient as we want them to be in terms of improving instruction for all kids, right? So we have some of the most heaviest administrative burden of any state in the country in terms of what we have to report on. We have more rules, more regulations, and the like. And then lastly, I think I'll bring it up now, but I was going to bring up Prop 13, but Meredith, I'll go for that now, which is when we talked about Prop 13, in a post Prop 13, there were three problems. One was the overall amount of money spent on education. Two was the volatility of that, and three was the timing. Let me just talk about each of those individually really quickly. The amount of education put us at as low as 43rd out of 50 states. We have climbed back that we are above the state, above the national average in terms of spending on an inflation adjusted basis. So that's good, right? The problem, what we're stuck with now is, unlike every other state that funds school districts and schools with property taxes, which are not volatile. Property taxes just slowly go up like this as values of real estate go up. We fund our school and much of our state with capital gains tax. Thank you, Meredith, for my slide. Woohoo! So what you'll see with this slide, which is the solid line, is where we rank, right? And so in a post Prop 13 world, we had ranked in fifth, and then we kept on ranking low, 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 and we are actually now at 16th in a non-cost adjusted basis. So on a cost adjusted basis, we're in the 20s. So that's not bad, right? And then the dotted line, what you see is what we're spending per pupil, right? And so what you see is that has gone up as well, right? But the problem is, and that Debbie lifted this up, is we have a lot of money that we're spending on pensions. Teachers deserve a good pension, but it's eating up proportionally. 30 cents of every dollar of a teacher's salary goes towards of our employee costs go towards pensions and what's called, I'm not going to do the acronym, other employee benefits. I'm saving you from the acronym from there. So acronyms, healthcare, and pensions are eating up. So as we've gone up in spending, one would think that a lot of that would get allocated to schools and get allocated towards teaching and learning. But unfortunately, because of this high cost state and the pension benefits, it's gone to that. Teachers deserve healthcare. Teachers deserve pensions. I don't want you to leave that. I don't think otherwise. But you can see where the marginal extra dollars go. So the amount is good. The problem is the fluctuation. And this is what Maria Sue has been fighting with mightily over the past year, because you've heard the word reserve bantied about back and forth 10 different ways to Sunday over the past 3 or 4 months. Why is that so? It's because our spending per pupil and what Maria Sue can count on getting from the state, she won't know until May how much money she's getting for the following academic year because it's all based on how much Nvidia stock got sold, how much Google stock got sold, how much Facebook stock got sold. That is actually the drive, specifically those three stocks and Google control how much money our schools get because we aren't based on a property tax basis. So what ends up happening is you have this collective bargaining agreement that we've agreed to with our teachers that has a 3 year or sometimes 2 years, depending on the district, right? We do 2 years, but we had to cut a deal with the teachers in February when Maria won't even know how much money she has until May for the next year, let alone the following year. So when we talk about the need for reserves, that's the dynamic she's facing. So in order to keep us from going bankrupt, large amounts of monies have to be parked in every California district is required to park a disproportionate share of dollars in reserve, unlike other districts in the rest of the state, in the rest of the country. So those are some really wonky. I apologize, Meredith. I went longer than I was supposed to, but
No, it's okay. It's okay. No, the
but
Prop
it's
13.
Prop
No,
13
yeah.
just is moved us from a property tax based predictable funding stream to an income based funding stream that is volatile and wild.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's helpful because I think a lot of us know that Prop 13 is bad, but we don't totally understand why. And so it's helpful to understand why. And there's a lot of efforts to repeal it, right? I mean, I don't know how many petitions I've signed or, signature things I've signed to repeal Prop 13, but I feel like I'm signing them like multiple times a year and that doesn't get done. And we know it's problematic. We're understanding a little bit more, thanks, Phil, like why it's problematic and not necessarily for yeah, it's more complicated than the like typical explanation you hear about it, but it's problematic. And we'd probably our schools would probably be better off without it. Right? Yes. Okay. Or
It
reformed.
depends. It depends on the reform.
Okay. Let's say there's lots of energy behind reforming it, okay? And Jill, I'd like to bring you into the conversation around that because BMWL does local campaigns, but also a lot of state campaigns, and you understand what it takes to win campaigns and why some campaigns aren't successful. And we know that Prop 13 is one of the things that we hear from a lot of families, teachers, community members, like, let's repeal it, let's reform it, whatever, one of those options. And we know that a few years ago, there was an effort that came close, but didn't quite make it. And so maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. But, basically, is there a way? And maybe describe a little bit about the efforts in the past and what lessons were learned from those to try to tackle Prop 13, and then what's happening with it right now, that folks should know about.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunate reality, and I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, is I don't think a repeal or a full repeal of Prop 13 is politically viable, particularly in the environment we're in now. In fact, what we need to do is protect we have to stop the Save Prop 13 campaign that is now going to be on the ballot in November. So they just qualified signatures that would basically, it's called the Save Prop 13 initiative, and it would actually raise the thresholds and make it even harder to raise revenue and strengthen Prop 13 and make it harder than ever to reform it. And it would remove the loophole that allows you to put measures on the ballot by signature. And when you do that, to have a lower vote threshold. So the number one thing we can do if you are frustrated and mad about Prop 13 is to vote no against this measure. They just submitted signatures, so it'll be on the ballot in November. It's kind of too late to stop the signature gathering, but I think it's really important that when these things end up on the ballot, people don't really understand what they are. And so by communicating with our friends and neighbors throughout the state and then letting them know that this is not the solution for public education. In fact, it's the opposite is really important. And I know it doesn't feel like we're moving forward, but we need to at least stop it from moving backward. And the big concern right now is affordability is the number one issue in California. In every neighborhood, people are feeling really pinched. And so the idea of stopping taxes in this environment is very attractive. I think the good news is, or there's a sliver of good news, and I'm sure other people have feelings about this, but Tom Steyer is a front-running candidate for governor, and he has committed to putting what's called split roll on the ballot in a special election if he's elected. And so what that would mean is, while we can't repeal Prop 13 in its entirety, we can at least change the way that commercial properties are impacted. And so the effort that happened in 2020, which is would leave homeowner property tax assessments intact, but remove those restrictions from commercial properties. That's the measure that failed in 2020 that you mentioned, Prop 15, which got 48% of the vote. And that is what Tom Steyer has committed to putting on the ballot for a special election. Now, putting it on the ballot doesn't mean that it will win, but it is, the first commitment of that type that we've been able to get. So I'm not sure that I am delivering the inspiring message that you are hoping for, but I don't think that we can hang our short-term hope. I think let's get through this election. Let's stop the Save Prop 13 measure, and then let's look at 2028 when we're going to have a Democratic presidential candidate at the top of the ticket. Turnout will be unbelievably high and more progressive than normal, and see if we can, take another stab at it then.
Okay.
Meredith,
All right. So maybe it's a pause. Go ahead, Dr. Sue.
Well, yes, the Prop 13 piece is probably a longer runway for us, and there is maybe a groundswell that we need to build, and we have to leverage momentum and take small, sizable chunks towards it. But the things that we are doing now, actively doing now, so the past several months, I've been working with large urban school district superintendents up and down the state of California, because the reality is all large urban cities and school districts are experiencing the same thing. We're all experiencing declining enrollment, and we're being pinched by the way the local control funding formula is allocating funds to school districts. So, I realize that there's a revenue source piece that we need to think about, but there's also a conversation about how do we work with our state leaders to change the formula. Because once you change the formula, you're going to change the way those dollars come down to school districts. So currently those dollars are coming down to us based on average daily attendance. But if we can make the small shift from average daily attendance to total enrollment, then it allows us to capture real costs for serving young people. Because just because a young person doesn't come to school that day doesn't mean that we don't need to continue to pay for that teacher or the custodian support or the clerk. So we need to have a different way that we're calculating the way we're funding schools. And then the other part to the reform that the superintendents are asking the state to work with us on is to use a different way to calculate poverty. As Debbie shared, there are two parts, two additional funding streams within the local control funding formula, which is the supplemental and the concentration allocations. And those two allocations are based on focal populations that SFUSD students represent. So if we can change the way those additional funds are allocated or calculated, then we are also going to be able to change the way that we can recapture those funds. And those are things that we're doing now. And those are proposals that we're sharing with the governor's office as well as with other state elected officials.
Okay, and before we move to local, and I welcome President Mandelman to the stage, are there ways parents, teachers, community members can help with those efforts, or do the superintendents and school boards of those districts have it under control? Is that something you need our help or not?
Yeah. So I'll speak up on that one. The answer is absolutely yes. What Jill talked about, which is the repeal of the it's based on a case called Cannabis v. Upton. Two of our parcel taxes were based on us only having to get 50% one. So myself and the teachers union put two of the parcel taxes on the ballot, and because we put it on the ballot, not the school board or not the board of supervisors, we only needed a 50% threshold. This is the thing that the business roundtable is trying to get rid of, right? And so what I would suggest, because we are going to have a partial tax, and we'll talk about that later if you want, Meredith, in 2028, and we're going to have a school bond in 2028. If this passes, it will make both of those more difficult, right? And that's a BFD for the kids, for our schools, and everything. And we want parents to experience what it's like to work at a real, honest to goodness, no holds barred campaign. So rather than just voting no on the campaign, I would invite as many of the SF parents to actually work the campaign, right? We need to have a huge showing from the Bay Area no campaign because we are the most liberal part of the state. So SF parents working across the 9 Bay Area counties on a no campaign, both funding it and working it and walking precincts and having that experience would be incredibly helpful. And that campaign will get stood up in the next couple of months, and Meredith will funnel all the information to you so you can send it out to your parents. But
Great.
working on that campaign would be extraordinarily difference maker for SFUSD.
Okay.
Well, and not to, I completely agree with Phil, but also we have an election in 40 days where we will be ostensibly
Yes.
electing a new governor. And, now that people understand the proposals that Maria has suggested, it would be very interesting to know what the gubernatorial candidates' positions are on that. And I would ask that parents reach out to those campaigns, ask them those questions, find out where, aligned organizations are and who they're endorsing, and make sure that you vote in that election, because right now it's a total toss up of who's going to be, in the top two. And I think people could really make a difference.
All great ideas. I am keeping track on sticky notes. I'm going to go on the office and we're going to get on the phones with our parents and our networks and get going on these. Okay, so we're going to shift to local. Thank you. That was really helpful on the state side. And I know there's more we can talk about on the state side, and we don't have all of the time tonight, but we can have another one of these soon. Let's shift to local and let's welcome President of the Board of Supervisors, President Rafael Mandelman, supervisor from my district, District 8, and known for his focus on government efficiency, accountability. He likes government accountability. Yes, am I right? Well, welcome to the
Love
stage
me
and to the
some government
conversation.
accountability.
Well, thank you for joining us, and it's perfect timing because we were just shifting from state to local, and so we're going to, and we heard from Kunal, Chief Modi from the mayor's office earlier to kind of kick off the conversation to hear a little bit about the mayor's priorities and how the mayor's office is thinking about our schools. But the Board of Supervisors also has a lot they can do. Of course, the supervisors do not, they're not in charge of the district, but you're very involved, right? A lot of the measures that have passed, like the Student Success Fund, other supervisors were involved with that. And the Board of Supervisors was very involved with the recent charter reform conversations that came up. And there's a lot that you can do. So why don't you just fill the gap of the dollars that we need over at our school district? So, no, but seriously, tell us a
Maria
little.
is encouraging that idea. Thank you, Maria.
So tell us though, because for public school families that see a wealthy city and see struggling schools, we often wonder what's going on at City Hall. We know there's a lot of money out there, although we also do know that there is a budget deficit, but budget challenges across the city, and maybe you can talk about that tension a little bit. But the city of San Francisco contributes about $240 million annually to SFUSD's budget, which is somewhere between 15 and 20%. And that's higher than most California districts, but a lot of it's tied up.
I'm going to just correct you. That is double the next
Okay.
closest.
Double the next closest. Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Phil. Double the next closest district, that's San Francisco. Okay, so thank you, city. Thank you, President Mandelman and your colleagues. And
But
the
it's
mayor.
also very expensive to live here and to do
Yes.
work here. So I just,
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Okay, so there's maybe more you can do. Okay, because this conversation is about more. So let's talk about more, President Mandelman. What else can we do? And I guess also the tension between how can we understand the city's role and the limits here, while also understanding the desire to do more, and just kind of maybe start a little bit more general before we get into the specifics.
Well, thanks for inviting me to join for a bit of this conversation. Um, uh, San Francisco. Okay, so the San Francisco General Fund, um, as Phil has explained, does more and sends more over to the school district than in any other county in California, um, and that is because a few things. We are a wealthy county, so we collect a lot of money, and we are a wealthy county that is highly taxed, and so we collect a lot of money into our general fund. And over the years, different supervisors have decided that we should put in front of the voters different set asides of general fund dollars to have money flow from the San Francisco General Fund over to Unified School District. Um, I think everyone is supportive of those set asides. I don't think there's any conversation about eliminating those set asides. But I will say, as someone who is currently enmeshed in conversations about charter reform, um, one of the topics that is often brought up, and we are not going to do much or perhaps anything about it this year. But one of the topics that comes up when you look at problems, things that are understood to be problems with the San Francisco Charter, are set asides are generally, in the aggregate, understood to be a problem. They commit our discretionary dollars, they pre-commit them and take them out of the hands of the mayor and the board of supervisors in solving our newly arising problems or issues.
President Mandelman, sorry.
Yeah.
Your audio is going in and out a little bit. I wonder if maybe we have you go. Oh, I don't know.
Relocate. Maybe I will relocate.
Okay. Okay, we'll get back to him on set asides. Let's hold that thought. Hold your thoughts on set. Actually, we can continue to talk about set asides a little bit. Um, uh, and then
I believe firmly that set asides are bad, except for those for kids.
okay, so we have set asides for kids. We have set asides for kids. You helped pass set asides for kids. I think we really should have President Mandelman back on for that conversation. Let's fast forward and then we'll come back. We have you talked about okay, we're gonna fast forward to 2028 and then we're gonna come back to set asides in 2026. Fast forward to 2028, you mentioned two ballot initiatives that you think will be on the ballot for spring of 2028 and the fall.
Yeah, so it's not an I think, it's an I know. So our QTEA, Quality Teacher Education Act, expires in 2028. So we need to renew that, okay? And originally, I think we did a 15 or 20-year thing on it. And so that we will run that. Jill and I have been in conversations about this. We will run that campaign in the spring, i.e., that'll be on the June ballot. And then, although we loathe to do two campaigns in 1 year, the timing is such that we have to. It's my fault. And then we'll do the school bond, the amount to be determined, but figure around the same size as the last one. We will do that in November. The reason we're splitting these two, we have to split the two up because it's two different campaigns. And to Jill's earlier point about the cannabis fee Upton overturn, we really want to make sure that we keep that spring ballot at a 50+1. Having said that, if this business group, Prop 13, protection, whatever they want to call it, we will have to get to 66 2/3. It's important to note that over the years, I've had some fabulous partners, both from labor, both from teacher labor as well as building trades labor. Uh, Occasionally the parents. I've had some great co-chairs over the years of these campaigns, but I'm getting old. And a lot of the people, my OGs, have moved on to other pastures. So, Meredith, you and I have had conversations about this. This is a great opportunity for SF parents and other parents groups in San Francisco to really step up. Jill will tell you, and I'll let her talk, the role of really sort of the on the boots on the ground working. My job is to do exactly what Jill and her partners have told me, but been telling me to do for 20 years, is to have no opposition. So if I can get no opposition and I can get the campaign funded, and we can get parents and teachers working on the ground, we win these things. I'll stop talking, Jill.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. One is, as Phil mentioned, the existing parcel tax is going to expire. So we have to go back to the ballot to ask voters to renew it. I assume I assume that we will, Phil and I haven't talked that much about this, but that we will test the idea of whether the voters will are open to increasing it, right? Who knows what the world is going to look like? We don't know what the world is going to look like in 2 months, let alone in 2 years. But we have to go to the voters and we have to ask them. The one of the challenges we've always faced is that parents are actually a very small percentage of the overall voting electorate, and a lot of parents don't vote, right? Not all parents, but there's a chunk of parents who don't vote. And I think one of the strategies when it comes to winning revenue measures on the ballot for schools is how can we maximize the vote from what we call the school family? I mean, we run school campaigns all over the state, and on some low turnout elections, you can actually change like significantly the vote and the turnout on a ballot measure. So if you think about, your neighbors, your friends, your family, your network, you being involved in a renewal or an increase of a SFUSD parcel tax, getting your friends and family to turn out and vote, that makes a huge difference in our ability to pass these measures. And as Phil said, when we started Phil and I have been doing these campaigns together for longer than I would like to admit. And when we started, we used to have like rooms of 50 people. It was parents and teachers and community members and nonprofit organizations. And we would all run these campaigns together. And now it's just a couple of us in a room doing the best that we can, to get the word out to the parents, to get the word out to the families that are going to be most impacted by the measure. Luckily, we live in a city that believes in the power of public education, but you all can make such a difference when it comes to renewing or potentially increasing our local revenue sources and the parcel tax in 2028. And we all look forward to working with you all on that.
Yes, I mean, we've got 130 people here right now, so hopefully you all are paying attention and ready to sign up for this. Because if we all,
And in the meantime, work the campaign this fall. And
Yeah.
can make one other suggestion? Another campaign that would be really important for you all to work on this fall as individuals is the Muni tax, right?
Yeah.
Keeping Muni afloat is really, really important for the kids getting to school, and that can't be emphasized enough. And for keeping our downtown vital. And if we keep our downtown vital, Supervisor Mandelman will be happy because our tax base will stay higher, and there'll be more money for kids in larger set asides. So the Muni, and I will also say one other thing, because the Muni, we're going to get a little wonky here. Muni is doing something that is what's called a square footage parcel tax. It is a novel approach, okay? And they are really pushing to maximize revenue. We don't know if it's going to work, but if it works, it opens up an avenue for other folks to try novel approaches as well. So if you guys could help with that campaign as well locally, that would be great. And we'll learn a lot of brownie points from the folks in City Hall, like Supervisor Mandelman, for doing
Okay,
that.
well, that's a good, looks like you got yourself resettled somewhere else. Beautiful. Is that back in the City Hall area?
I'm in the Fairmont.
Oh,
How's the audio?
great. Thank you.
Amazing.
We
Thank
paused
you,
our
Fairmont.
set-asides conversation, so you're welcome to talk about how you need us for Muni tax, or we can go back to set-asides.
I mean, I think it makes sense. Just on the topic of set asides, the set asides that are currently available for the district are pretty sizable. And in our conversations about charter this year, there's been a lot of discussion about the way in which set asides are eating up an ever greater share of the city's budget. So it's grown from something like 15% 20 years ago to more than 30% now. Many of these set asides are structured in ways so that they grow. Each year they're a little bit more, and over time that percentage will go up on its own without even adding additional set asides. Now that doesn't mean there are going to be no new set asides, but when the charter reform conversation began, I think there was interest in many people in figuring out a way to cap the growth of set asides. And so that's, in terms of if there's interest in trying to take a larger share of the city's general fund for the district, it's going to be running up against that concern. And that concern is rooted in the reality that the city does have to do things that are not schools. We have to pay for a police force and a general hospital and a public health system and many things in addition. So we can't, write the entire general fund over to the district.
What about,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead, keep going.
And at this point, the budgetary reality at the city is we're in the second or third year where the mayor's office has begun the budget process having to cut money from the budget. And in each of the last two to 3 years, that has meant cutting $500 million to $1 billion over 2 years. Most of the even marginally easy ways to do that have been done. And so you're now seeing and you're reading that the mayor is laying people off from the city government. You are going to be reading about cuts to nonprofit organizations that do incredibly important work for vulnerable people, HIV prevention work with kids, work with seniors, and millions of dollars are being cut out of the city budget for that. So it'll be challenging, to say the least, to try to find additional funds to cut to make money available for the district, which is why things like the parcel tax or other new revenue are really important. Like somehow we have to be getting more money into the system, either directly to the district or to the city to give to the district if we're not going to be even more dramatically cutting workers and services that the city provides.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. There's
Meredith, can I just jump in really quickly?
Yes.
I hear you, President Mandelman, and I just want to just emphasize that not all set-asides are the same, and that obviously the set-asides for children's services are the best.
Yeah.
But it's the best because they were done they were written in a way where there was a lot of accountability to it. It required greater oversight. It required partnership. It required community engagement. And so just several years ago, I know that when there were conversations about charter reform, SPUR did this is before this version of SPUR, but SPUR did a whole assessment of set-asides, and they talked about set-asides that had sunset dates and had deep planning requirements and engagements as best practice. And they did point to the Children's Fund, the Public Education and Enrichment Fund. And at that time, we didn't have this the Student Success Fund, but those are best practices. And I think as the city starts thinking about set-asides and how we judge them, I think we should judge them based on how they're managed, how they're used, and the results that they aim to achieve.
Yes. I mean, I think, though, that one of the challenges with any set-aside conversation, and where the set-aside conversation has gone pretty predictably this year, is that there are none that can actually get meaningfully cut or reduced. And meanwhile, we see them eating up a larger and larger share of the city's general fund. So not to say that they're not worthwhile, and there's certainly no political appetite for getting rid of the seemingly any of the ones that exist now. I mean, there is perhaps accountability.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
On PEEF, but the other reality is, like, in what universe would the city ever, even if you built in more accountability, like in what universe would the city ever not provide those funds to the district? It's hard. I mean, there's been a discussion in the past about trying to build in, and I think we did in the renewal, sort of like more ostensibly accountability. But again, like the city is probably not, unless the mayor wants to really lean into trying to play a greater role, going to be trying to remotely manage the district.
Can we? I was gonna double click on accountability, but I think actually one of our parent questions that are coming later. We'll go there, and so I actually want to double click on the oh my gosh, what's the word I was looking for? The restrictions with some of the set-asides, and when these set-asides get put in place and they don't necessarily have the intended effect. So like we are hearing from some schools that have been having challenges with the Student Success Fund, and great goals. We've got many million, 35 million currently, and it could go up to 60 million over the years. For our schools, it's a lot of money for our schools, and it's all supposed to be about student success. But we heard from a school recently said that they couldn't, I don't understand the logistics or the restrictions, but something about the restrictions, and they were buying t-shirts with the money because that was all they could buy with the money, t-shirts. So, and another school buying furniture, which, I mean, our schools do need furniture, but
maybe not the highest need.
I'm happy to jump in on this one and cover for Maria and cover for my friend supervisor. So that was the original drafting of that had some flaws in it. I think just to be very honest, and there was an element of it that it was a solution in search of a problem. Okay. And that's not to say that community schools aren't important and the community school coordinator positions aren't important and do good stuff. Supervisor Mandelman and I have been in a conversation. Supervisor Melgar and I have been in conversation. Maria and I have been in conversations. The mayor's office has been in the conversation. There is a way for, on the margin, to have some of the restrictions be amended through what we call ordinance statute. We don't have to go back to the ballot, right? So Supervisor Mandelman, Supervisor Melgar, Maria, and other supervisors have committed to try to find some solutions to give the district some additional flexibility that could be helpful as it relates to how those student success fund expenditures happen. Obviously, our labor partners need to be at the table because many of those positions are funded. Many of the positions through the Student Success Fund are funded by labor, so they need a seat at the table. So we will be unpacking that and examining that, I would say, once supervisor gets through the hell that is the city budget. I've gotten a commitment from him, right? And some of his colleagues that we will turn to trying to address this. Am I accurate, Supervisor?
I mean, I am happy to try to address this anytime. Although you're correct that the next couple of months are particularly rough between charter reform and budget. But
yes,
I mean, the Student Success Fund, I believe, and I was not one of the authors of it. I think the supervisors, particularly Supervisor Ronan, really felt like the community school model was critically important, and there needed to be these positions created in each of these schools, and really wanted to. I mean, and there's sort of also a basic question in some of this of like, how much do you trust the district and how much do the voters believe needs to be imposed on the district because the district can't be trusted to spend the money that is provided to the district. And it seems to me that in the Student Success Fund, in that particular piece of legislation, there's a fair amount of distrust of the district built into it. And
that's absolutely correct.
And that makes it hard to be, nimble and and react to the changing needs over the years because it's designed to hamstring the district. That feels like something that would be good in my mind to try to loosen up. Whether we can do whatever we can do by ordinance, I'm interested. Whatever, if it needs to go to the ballot, that I think, Phil, your wise counsel that this, would need to be a, broad and inclusive process that brings everybody to the table and builds some kind of consensus around, what to do with it. And at the end of the day, the other problem is it's not so much money. So it's not like even fixing the Student Success Fund really just, ensures the district's financial concerns are addressed. It's like that's probably a relatively small piece of doing it.
Yeah, very specifically, we're looking for possible flexibility on 25 million on a $1.2 billion budget.
Right.
But the flexibility will allow our school communities to use the funds more appropriately. And I think this is kind of the dance, not the dance, but the balance between accountability and I know, because I was part of the team that was helping to draft Student Success Fund when I was
Maria.
No, sorry, everyone.
What did you do? What did you do?
I was on the dark side then.
And just for the record, it's the one campaign that Jill and I did not work on.
Well, I've seen the light.
Just saying.
Just saying.
I see the light here. And, I think that the district and, over the last, in the past have had budgetary issues. And when I was at DCYF, we did see that there were many years where there were lots of monies left on the table because the district was not able to draw down, spend down. So when the idea came to create Student Success Fund, we wanted to put some very rigid guardrails around the use of the funding, and working with then Supervisor Ronan and Supervisor Melgar and community around just what would this look like? The bottom line, the end goal was for us to put more resources into school communities, into the schools. But now that I'm on the school district side, I fully recognize that those guardrails are way too rigid, because it has now hamstrung our school's ability to really access those dollars, right? It's not fair for our school communities to be like, I see those dollars, I see thousands of dollars sitting there, but I can't access it because of these requirements. And so President Mandelman and Supervisor Melgar and Phil and others have suggested that maybe we come together and really think through what would a ordinance change look like. And I think that will just open up a little bit and create a little bit more flexibility so that we can then
and the mayor's office is also on board with this too.
Yes.
I should. So, anyway.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. And I think that we've heard from parents, teachers, principals, lots of folks who are interested in making those dollars work better for our schools and for our kids. So it sounds like everyone could be on board. Where was I going? There was a spicy idea we didn't get to, and we're kind of entering into Q&A territory. I mean, and for the folks for the audience, a lot of your questions, we had dozens and dozens of questions that came in, and a lot of them are already worked into the conversation tonight. And then we also have a few questions that will be asked during a rapid fire Q&A. The spicy question, the VAT tax. Okay, who wants to talk about this? Okay,
I'll take this on. I'll be the skunk.
There's an idea out there, the VAT tax, which is a potential tax on private schools. San Francisco is one of the highest percentages of private, families who are opting into private and parochial schools of any city in the country. I think maybe just after Seattle, on a percentage basis. So second highest, we were the highest. In England, the government recently started applying a 20% VAT, a sales tax, to private school fees with the goal of raising. I'm sorry, the translators. Sorry about that. I was really trying to get this in. There is a private school tax to raise revenue to invest in the public schools from the private schools. It costs families, but it has ripple effects across the entire education system. The tax could apply to tuition and related services, and the schools pass these costs on to those parents through higher fees. It's faced some legal challenges, but courts have so far upheld these policies in England. So, Phil Halperin, what say you? And then we will go into Q&A.
Okay. One thing Jill and her team taught me many years ago, going all the way back to my first campaign, is the reason we've been so successful with these campaigns, and we've done 10 of them, raised $8 billion, as we said, like more if you count the Student Success Fund, is we've had no funded opposition ever. And the original campaign that I worked on with Jill and her team was they wouldn't even work for me because there was opposition. And they said, until you get the following 5 people to not oppose what you're trying to do, which was at the time was the 2006 school bond, we're not even going to work for you because one funded opposition and you're dead. Right? And so I had to work my tail off to get that to happen. Let me just read some numbers to you really, really quick, Meredith, okay? 74, 71, 80, 75, 69, 70, 61, 74, 74, 72, 82. That is the percentage of yes. That is the percentage of yes vote we've gotten on every single measure we've done since 2006. If we went to the ballot with something like this, we would be at 45% because we would have massively funded opposition to the tune of $2 to $4 million. And to some of the earlier points, the reason Jill talks about the small room that I now find myself in with Jill and her friends, the only people actually coming to the table with real money for 4 of these campaigns over the past 4 campaigns has actually been, and you guys can look up the names, private school parents and charter school parents. That is where 90% of the money for the campaigns for public schools actually comes from. And these are people who believe in public education. They believe in they've made different choices for their own children, but they want good schools for kids in San Francisco. So we would be going totally counter to that, and it would most likely lose. And then in 2028, we would then have to go to the ballot for a partial tax and a school bond, having a created us versus them dynamic, which is the last thing we want to do in this city. We all need to be pulling on the oars together. And I appreciate the enthusiasm around studying this. I appreciate the looking at the UK, but this kind of approach would not work for us.
I just want to, can I add? I think that what we have seen over time is, and a lot of this has come up in the comments too, distrust of the district, right? One of the questions we asked to see if people would be interested in passing a measure is like, do you think our schools need more money and do you trust the district to spend it well? And over the years, we have seen those numbers come down. I mean, there have been phases of leadership at SFUSD that the school that the parents and the voters at large don't trust. And what we need to do is focus on the long term, which is how do we build back that trust? There's a lot of people in the comments saying the district is doing such a good job now. Like, great, tell your friends and neighbors about it. We need to get those numbers up, and picking a fight with private school parents who don't trust the district to spend their money well or don't want to send their kids there is not the way that we are going to, restore trust in the school district to educate our kids, to spend money wisely, and to give them more money. Like, we need to be thinking more broadly and bigger picture than that.
Okay, well, it is a spicy idea. I'm not going to say we're done with it yet because there's some energy out there.
I get the desire behind it.
Even if it's a losing campaign, it could be interesting. We heard from Supervisor Melgar. Well, she was like, "Huh, that's interesting." President Mandelman, thoughts? And we have 10 minutes of Q&A, so we got to move to those.
I mean, I think it's interesting. I think it would be, yeah. I wonder how the private school parents would react to it if they would feel like it was directed.
They would lose their minds.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
All right. Well, I'm going to bring 2 parents who are asking some of the parent questions to the stage. Rashik and Stephanie, are you there? You can There's two Rashiks, but it's actually a Rashik and a Stephanie. Thank you, guys. We have two public school parents who are asking some of the additional questions that have come in. And yeah, maybe we can see if we can squeeze in 3 or 4 questions and you guys can rapid fire your answers.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you,
Not
Meredith.
too
And thanks
rapid because of translation.
obviously, no worries. I was spending the last hour trying to figure out why there was 2 Rashiks on this and thought it was on me, but now we know. Rashik Zarif here. I'm a SFUSD parent of McKinley Elementary. It's great to see everyone here, and thanks, Rafael, and thanks for this great session so far. One of the key questions that came up during the Q&A, and just to take a step away from the local aspect is, Maria, you've spent a lot of time and effort with other districts on going to Sacramento, focusing on enrollment-based funding reform, special education funding reform, adjusting the COLA so that it's actually realistic to, the cost of living adjustments in the San Francisco Bay Area. Out of all of them, and in light of the gubernatorial election coming up, what is most realistic to be able to be actually reformed within the next year or so?
Realistically, realistic and what I hope. So realistically, I think the best bet for us is to ask for the state to hold us harmless for our enrollment, realistically, because it's not as significant. It is, but it's, so right now we're looking at our enrollment to be hovering around 49,000 students. And 2 years ago it was at 50,000 students. So realistically, I think that is what probably would be a stronger push, primarily because we are seeing the decline due to increased cost of living in the city. We're seeing families leaving the city. We're also seeing the impact of the fear of ICE and immigration impacting the number of students that we have and students that show up. What I would like to see is for our state officials to truly see the impact of them using the funding formula that we have currently, because I personally believe that it isn't solving the problem. It's actually creating a larger structural deficit for us, because it is unpredictable. And quite frankly, it's not correct, right? So our mayor has made adjustments to how we are calculating levels of need in the city. And he, in the city, has made the decision to increase what is a base salary level for a family of 4. We should use the same calculation to determine what is poverty and what is where do the concentration and supplemental dollars should be based on. I think those 2 changes in terms of moving from ADA to enrollment and changing how we calculate poverty would be ideal, and is something that the other superintendents are fighting really hard for. And then in my conversation at the state level around increasing allocation for special education, this year alone, we are seeing special education continue to grow to be $280 million of our budget. That is 2/3 of our budget. It's 2/3 of the general fund of our local control funding formula. It is significant, and yet you already saw what Debbie shared. It's what the federal government's giving us $16 million. The state just allocated additional $3 million. It's not enough. It's costing us a lot to serve our children, and it's of course federally required, and so of course we would have to do it. But it is a significant increase and year over year increase. But if anything, I would love families to help us continue to fight the fight at the state level, to help our legislatures understand that if we make those changes, it will have a significant impact for all of the large urban school districts.
Thank you, Maria. A follow-up question, and it's actually on the other end of the spectrum. And Rafael mentioned earlier with respect to the distrust that has been within the district, and that kind of like the momentum is changing. But there is still this perceived this community concern about waste, administrative bloat, and lack of transparency within the district. How do we address that while still advocate for more funding, especially from the state level?
Well, I think it's about requiring us to put all of our data up on dashboards or up on the websites, asking questions, and having forums like this. I think you've already saw that we did in second interim or in January, wanted to be as transparent as possible with all of our one-time sources. And so we created Fund 17, which is the reserve funds, because we wanted to be really clear and honest with the community that these are dollars that are unallocated right now. And we wanted to set it aside as a reserve for cases of emergency. And we did indicate, and the board agreed that there was a case of emergency where we needed to use and tap into those funds. But imagine where whenever we are not fully expending down any of those restricted funds that are not just generally available to us, they're restricted for different types of programs or sources. If we don't use all those dollars, we put them into this reserve, and then we use that to help us smooth out perhaps any type of enrollment changes, right? So then we are no longer beholden to the March 15th pink slip notice. We are no longer beholden to the May 15th final separation notice, because we will then only be beholden to the number of students who choose which schools and the allocations of those schools. Because we'll have the reserve, we can then manage the staffing needs of each of our schools. And it creates a much more smoother and more stable way to budget. The one thing I've learned and I've struggled with over the last year and a half is that school districts budget on an annual basis. And we can't do that because that doesn't give stability to our educators, to our school community. We need to pivot to multi-year funding, multi-year budgeting, so that there's greater stability and there's certainty. But we can't do that unless we have a reserve that will then help us manage the fluctuation in enrollment.
Okay, thank you, Maria. I want to pass it over to Stephanie. I know she has a couple of questions as well.
Sure. And I know we're short on time, so I'm struggling with all the questions that we've received here. Stephanie Falkenstein, SFUSD parent. We've talked a lot about how the number of students impacts, right, is a big factor in how schools are funded. What do you think we can do to increase enrollment, or at least to stabilize the declining enrollment that we're seeing?
So two things. One is listen to what parents want, and what we're hearing loud and clear. Parents want more TK classrooms. And we are trying to figure out how to put that into all of our schools, particularly where families where we're seeing large wait lists. So one. Number two, what we're also hearing is parents want options. So they want, one of the options that we're hearing very loud and clear is a K-8 Mandarin immersion school. And we are working really hard to get that school up and ready for school year 27-28. What we've been doing is just, trying to source the teachers, getting any teacher that's interested that will be willing to go to San Francisco State to get their certification. We were able to secure a grant so that teachers do not even have to pay for it. They just enroll, and we will use the grant to cover that, so that when we open in school year 27-28, we'll have teachers ready to go. We brought on a consultant, Leanna Cito, who was the founder and creator of Alice Fong Yu, the first Cantonese immersion school in the country, to help us identify the curriculum, to help us think through how do we do the recruitment, how do we do programming and services. So those are the ways for us to make sure to recapture students. And honestly, the second way, the third way is for us to focus on our academics. We gotta improve educating our kids, our bread and butter. Kids gotta read, write, and do math, and we gotta do everything we can to improve academics and then prove to families that we are their first choice. We have to be their first choice. And so speaking about that, we're also thinking about how we can make school enrollment more predictable so that families just know, yeah, I live here, that's my school down the street, that makes sense. And then maybe choices like, oh, well, yeah, but I really like that type of program over there. And you can apply there. But it has to be more predictable. We can't do this kind of, magical gymnastics thing that families I had to do when I was enrolling my child. It has to be predictable. So it has to be easy to apply to SFUSD. It has to be just simple. Yes, of course, my child will get the best education at SFUSD. My child will have all the different programs and opportunities at SFUSD. And SFUSD is my first choice, and it's going to be my choice. Those are how we're going to bring more kids back, build confidence for families to send their most precious asset to us. And then, of course, continuing to work on the budget, on stabilizing our finances, on making sure that we're doing all the right things, because the last thing a family wants to know is that, oh, great, you're now back in negative status, or you're gonna go under and be taken over by the state. So we need to ensure that there is credibility and stability in the district.
That was a great question to end on. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Rashik. And thank you to our panel. I think, I wrote down lots of stickies, lots of ideas, things we're going to work on. We're starting tomorrow.
Meredith, can I say just one last thing? It'll be 30 seconds.
Yeah.
2 weeks from today on May 7th, the third release of the Getting Down to the Facts studies, which has been a project of mine for the past 16 years, which is a statewide project about what are the real facts in California education. The latest release in anticipation of a new governor is 2 weeks from today. I invite you all to read as many of these papers. There are 55 of them, but there's 21 research briefs and then one summary. But I know there's the 108 people who are left on this call are the nerds in this place, and they want to get their wonk on. If you want to get your wonk on and you want the real answer to a lot of these vexing questions we had, Getting Down to the Facts, a week from today, Meredith will send around the link, is a really well worth your time. And I'll do a little bit of shopping about 2 or 3 ones that you guys should read about in particular, because it really lifts up. California is uniquely bad at educating kids, and it's not just about money. We do a lot of things wrong, and we need to do a lot of things better. So, and Getting Down to the Facts will help you guys weed through that.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, send that to us. And we have everybody's email from signing up. So we'll make sure that you get all of these ideas that we've been writing down from, this year through 2028. We have a lot of work to do, and we know the energy is there across the city, through our community, through all of the teachers and our community supporters. We know the energy is there. And so we're really optimistic that Jill and Phil will not experience what they did in the recent campaigns with not a lot of help, because I think there's a lot of energy right now. And I believe in all of us and what we're doing here and how we can be part of this positive change and bring more funding to our schools. We know it cannot hurt. We need it. And so thank you for all of your time tonight. Those for you for attending. We hope everyone learned something tonight. I definitely did. We will follow up with some ideas for what we can do next. And actually, on that note, so we already have your contact information because you signed up for tonight. So we will be following up with you and what you can do. But another thing, oh shoot, sorry, me and technology is. One second. You can really let us know that you want to be mobilizing for some of these actions that we talked about, whether it's ballot initiatives or writing the questionnaire for the gubernatorial candidates on what their stance on education, facilities, the facilities measure in 2028, parcel tax increase, all of these things, if you're really gung-ho about it, we want to grow our funding action team. We've been meeting with families over the last few months. A lot of what we did tonight was based on what we've been talking about with them, and we want to grow that group and grow this coalition of mobilizers for more funding for our schools. So you can use the QR code. I think Lana's going to drop that in chat, sign up, and then we'll know you're really all about this. So thank you so much, everyone. I will leave it there and we'll say goodnight and thank you. Have a good night.